welcome to today's McMaster University Continuing Education Caregiving Essentials webinar. Healthcare shouldn't make us cry. I would like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we reside. McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations, and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. My name is Jennifer, and I'll be your host on behalf of McMaster Continuing Education. Today, I am joined by our facilitators, Donna Thompson and Sue Robbins. Donna Thompson is the author of The Four Walls of My Freedom: Lessons I've Learned from a Life of Caregiving. She is a consultant and speaker on issues relating to family caregiving, disability, and aging. Donna is a patient and family advisor on health research and policy, and she teaches family caregivers in Canada how to advocate for care in hospital and in the community. She blogs regularly at the Caregiver's Living Room. Donna is the facilitator of Caregiving Essentials and Infection Prevention and Control for Caregivers and Families, our free online courses for family caregivers. And I would also like to introduce you to Sue Robbins. Sue Robbins is a healthcare activist, speaker, and author. Her new book, Ducks in a Row: Healthcare Reimagined, is a scrappy challenge to the established healthcare world. Ducks in a Row is based on Sue's work life and patient engagement, and provides insights and practical information for those who want real change in healthcare. Her first book, Bird's Eye View: Stories of a Life Lived in a Healthcare, is a memoir of her experience as a mom to a young man with Down syndrome and as a cancer patient. In addition to her books, Sue has written for the New York Times, Canadian Medical Association Journal, and the Globe and Mail. She is also fellow with Dr. Victor Montori's Patient Revolution. She lives with her family in the rainforest that is Vancouver, Canada. Donna, I'll hand things over to you.
Thank you so much, Jen. And welcome, everybody. We are going to have a really, really interesting discussion today. Hi, Sue Robbins, my friend, my esteemed friend who is shaking up the world in healthcare. By your books, by your touring, by your speaking, by your social media presence, and just by your radical self. I wonder, Sue, if you would like to introduce your family, and then in a minute, I'm going to ask you to read from your new book a little bit.
For sure. Is there a way to advance this? There we go. The slide. There it is. And then when we're done with the slides, it'll just be you and me, Donna. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Because you said we're going to have a conversation around our kitchen table. That's what this is about. And so
that's
it's like,
it.
throw
That's
the
right where we're
PowerPoint
at.
slides out the window.
Oh God, yeah.
But this one is actually a picture of my family. So I always try to open with a photo of them, no matter what audience I'm talking to, because I think it's really important to put me in context of my family, because I am a part of something bigger. It is certainly not just myself. So first I'll introduce my family. My family is a blended family, interesting family, very diverse family. This is the last photo that was taken of us in 2019 before the pandemic. I feel very grateful. My daughter chose 2019 to get married, not 2020 or 2021 or 2022. And so I'll just, from left to right, my son Aaron is on the left. You might be able to tell by his short stature and his facial features that Aaron has Down syndrome. He is almost 19 years old, which he's very thrilled about because in BC, that means he can go and have a drink when it's safe one time soon in the bar. Next to him is my husband, Mike. Next to him is the groom. His name is Isak. My daughter, Ella, is the bride. And I might talk about Ella a little bit today. Ella is, in fact, a pediatric RN who works in the Children's Hospital in Edmonton. And she certainly chose nursing, she says, because of her brother, which I think happens a lot in caregiving families, that our kids end up migrating towards professions maybe they wouldn't have considered before because of their exposure when they were kids. My son Isaac is beside her, and he's the opposite guy. He's not in healthcare. He's actually a drummer. He's a musician, and he lives down in LA. And then there's me. I don't know if you can see my head right now. Can you see my head right now, Donna?
Yeah.
I can see your head. Okay. But I was all dressed up there. I'm in my pandemic clothes right now, so I won't even tell you what I'm wearing on the bottom. And then just to round it out, I had to add this extra picture because Ella and Isak had a baby at the end of November, and his name is Levi, and he is now 3 months old. And it's been very, when I think about caregiving, I think my caregiving started when I had Isaac almost 29 years ago. Really, I became a caregiver and involved with the unpaid world of caregiving when I was a mother to my typically developing kid, Isaac. And so I, as I'm watching Ella adjust to motherhood, I realize how, especially now during the pandemic, how little support we give to mothers who are with their children at home and starting on their caregiving journey. And, what a shame that actually is. And I know we're going to talk more about that today. But I just think even in what I call the typically developing world, there is a lack of support of us as we care for other human beings. It's just something that's not valued in society, but I value it. So I try to show Ella that I value it, and I go to visit her as much as I can and make her meals and look after her so she can look after her baby. I think this is something that we're really missing. Yes, that is what we do. So anyways, that's my family.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. And it's so wonderful I know your family, but I want everybody to know your family. We were just talking before our webinar went live today and about healthcare and about the many ways that healthcare experiences, illness experiences, and being treated for those illnesses that treatment in and of itself can be very harmful. And I would say, I would challenge or invite everyone who's listening today to consider their own healthcare experiences and the healthcare experiences of everyone they love, and think about those painful memories that hurt for a long time after. And that is what we want to get into today. Sue, you are going to help us reimagine a healthcare system that doesn't make us cry. And I wonder if you could just kick us off by reading a little bit of the beginning of your new book, Ducks in a Row.
Sure, I'm happy to. I want to read one of the very first chapters, and it's called Power to the People. So that's us. We are the people. 2 words sum up this book. What is the problem with healthcare? Power. What is the answer? Love. It is an act of love to relinquish power. I talk about the book a bit. This section tackles power imbalances in healthcare. Power is like a pie. There are only so many pieces of it to go around. Folks who have the power hang on to those pieces of pie, even hoarding slices because they are scarce and limited. This does not only apply to healthcare executives. From the Department of Health down to the organizational chart to the booking clerks, people hang on to their power for dear life. You cannot say you want to partner with patients or encourage shared decision-making unless you're willing to give up some of your power. As a recent cancer patient, I have witnessed this power mongering firsthand. A card arrives in my mailbox telling me the date and time to come to my oncology appointment. I am told to arrive early. When I arrive, the receptionist loudly states my personal information for all in the waiting room to hear. Suddenly, time is important when I am on the clinic's clock. I am not told how long I must wait, and therefore I sit in the waiting room seemingly indefinitely. I'm called by my first name, or as I get older, referred to as dear. The first thing that happens when I'm finally called is I get weighed by a person. Who is this person? She's wearing a name tag, but I can't read it. She doesn't introduce herself or give her title. She holds my chart full of information about me, but I know nothing about her or even what's on the chart. I don't want to be weighed, but I'm not given a choice. I'm instructed to take off my clothes and sit in a paper gown until the doctor arrives. The doctor shows up fully dressed. If my husband's with me, she ignores him. She does not chit-chat. She's rushed and she seems unhappy to see me. Maybe a patient has died. Am I not an interesting case? I'm trying to sum up empathy for her, but I'm worried about my cancer. She examines me and leaves my gown open, my breasts exposed. I'm trying to listen to her, but I feel embarrassed to be in such a state. I bring up a concern and she dismisses it with a wave of her hand. She asks if I have questions, but leaves before I can formulate an answer. I exit the appointment feeling dejected. Any power I might have had when I walked into the oncology clinic has been methodically taken away from me. Depersonalizing patients is a way to strip them of power. The system grabs power through their policies and processes, like mailing a rigid appointment time. People grab power by dehumanizing patients through announcing my personal information in the waiting room, not telling me how long I must wait, and not introducing themselves. The entire interaction with the oncologist left me feel vulnerable and deflated. Let us construct how the power balance occurs both at the point of care and in organizations. To nurture relationship-based care, we must be aware of and acknowledge the power imbalance first. The key is to start examining personal values and stop blaming the system. The system is made up of people. People drafted the policies and operationalized the processes to create this power discrepancy. We are all the system. The first step is to banish the words, "I blame the system," from your vocabulary. That's
You
it,
know.
man. Take back the power. So we're going to talk about that today. I know. So, but we do have, that chapter demonstrates how healthcare makes me cry. Anyways, I don't necessarily cry in the moment, but certainly afterwards I do. And there's many indignities that, especially if you have breast cancer, oh my God, that you have to undergo that do make you cry. But I just want to be hopeful and say by the end of this session, we will talk about how we can take back and step into our own power as caregivers and as patients.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Gehane, hi, Gehane, is here. And she said, you're talking about each one of us, the way each one of us might feel, but don't have the courage to say, thank you for sharing. And Terry said, I've read your book, Sue, and sent it to my provincial minister of health.
Mm-hmm.
If we all do that, we may get the attention of politicians to withdraw funding to the corporations that are taking over our health care.
And Terry's been great. Terry's starting up a movement, I think, to do that for everybody. To send books, ducks in a row
awesome.
to that. Yes.
That's awesome. I said that I wasn't going to tell very many or any stories, but I have to tell this one after listening to what you said. Sometimes these exchanges we don't think of them as important. We think of them as necessary humiliations to get the treatment and the cure that we need or that someone we love needs. And I remember being with my mother in the hospital room, and my mother was in her 90s and on her third case of C. difficile in the hospital. And the doctor came in, he was a young doctor and very good looking. And my mother, being my mother, started flirting with him. And she said, he said, can you tell me a little bit about, your history? And so my mother started talking about being a 12-year-old at camp and taking a canoe out in the middle of a storm and getting in trouble, and thinking that she is charming him. And what I was watching was his foot tapping, just tapping. And this frozen sort of half smile on his face, like, how do I get this woman to be quiet? Cut to the chase. What have your symptoms been? What's your medical history? Can you give me any relevant information? And I said, Mom, the doctor doesn't want to hear this. And I, because you panic, you're in a hurry and thinking that the doctor might leave without understanding her health, and she would go without treatment because she has thought that she was in a different conversation. And my mother looked chastened, deflated. And the doctor, I gave the doctor the information, very officially, like curt, clipped, fast, and he left. And I said, well, Mom, he was really cute, but like he's obviously in a massive hurry. And my mother didn't say anything. It was just one more reason to feel disempowered, to feel diminished, smaller, less worthy, not worthy of being able to have a social interaction with someone who visited what is essentially her bedroom in the hospital. And so, yeah, that's what we're talking about today, I think, right?
That story makes me sad. That does made
me sad
for everybody, for your mom and for you and for that doctor, because he's, to me, missing out what the purpose of medicine is. And that is to care for people. That's what it's about, not to talk about your mom's medical history. That's a part of it. But imagine what he had done if he had walked in and asked your mom something specific about herself so she could talk about herself as a person. Like maybe she had on some slippers or a nightgown or had a picture beside her bed, and he had attempted to connect with her in that way so that she could tell a story about herself, to show him she wasn't just this diagnosis, that she was a human being. And I think that's something that I ask for from health professionals, is that they see us.
How do you ask for it? What are the words you use?
So you're talking about like at point of care, not necessarily when I'm talking to med students. Okay, so point of care is harder because I often feel very vulnerable when I am, and I'm like, everyone's like, oh, Sue, you're such a big activist, like you know how to speak up. And I'm like, I do not know how to speak up for myself when I am sitting in a clinic room with my oncologist. I become the smallest person imaginable, and I totally turtle. And I think of everything I should have said after I left. And I often write about it, as you know, my essays. That's how I process what happens in healthcare to me. But I do not speak up, in the moment. I think one thing that I try to do, I'm thinking about my son, Aaron, who's now 19, is that when I go to appointments, I mean, I still drive him. I drive him around. I'm his chauffeur basically, but I drive him to the doctors, and I'm trying to make sure that he gets a chance to talk to the doctor. That's not just me as his mother doing it. But one thing I'll do to connect is I'll ask the doctor about herself, like as a person. And I happen, for our family doctor, I know she just had twins last year. So I ask, how are your babies doing? And I think that me extending out to try to connect in some sort of relationship way, I'm trying to role model what I want them to do. Right. Or if they talk to me directly, which they often do with Aaron, because they don't think Aaron can speak for himself, or they assume they won't be able to understand him, which is sometimes the case, right? But I'm always there to translate for them. I never get what that fear is about, but I do kind of understand it, but I always redirect them to Aaron. So if they say, how old is he? I'll turn to Aaron and say, Aaron, how old are you? To try to, I guess I'm trying to model
all the time.
the behavior that I want to see in them. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Like, so my oncologist, I never saw her. She was cold, like as ice. And everyone's like, oh, she has a hard job. Lots of people die. I'm like, but do you have to cause people extra pain because they have cancer because you're so cold-hearted? Like, that's not an excuse to me. That, like, that doctor, that busy thing, I know you said we always forgive them because we know they're busy. Well, there's a lot of research, doctors love research, that says that it doesn't take more time to show compassion towards a patient. It actually doesn't take more time. There could have been a way for him to address your mom, to redirect her without totally she feeling shut down, right? And
I know.
there's a book called Compassionomics, and it's a whole bunch of research about compassion in the healthcare world. And it says it actually takes 31.5 seconds. So whenever I'm at a talk and somebody says, we don't have time to do all these kindnesses that you keep talking about, Sue Robbins, I push back and I say to them, this isn't something you take the time to do, you make the time to do it, because this is the important stuff in healthcare.
Yeah. Gehin has just written in the chat box, the worst thing is when I'm facing a doctor who says to me, don't get involved in your 17-year-old son, because I am giving her details about my son's background and she doesn't have enough time to hear this background. And sometimes, our health is revealed in our stories of how we live outside of the clinic examination room. And I'm interested, Sue, if when you say that you go to, your oncology appointment, for example, and you are turtling with a whole bunch of emotions and vulnerability and so forth, does Mike, your husband, or whomever is with you, represent what you want in any way out of that, 20 minutes with the doctor? Or
yeah, okay. So in the clinic room, I would often be alone, and my husband's listening to me. I love my husband, but he has to work. And when I was in cancer treatment, I was not working. Like, I'm a freelancer, but I was in no shape to do writing or anything like that. So I wasn't working, or he has to drop Aaron off at school. Like, we have like family obligations. So I would often go alone. And I think there are people who don't come necessarily with support people, but I think this kind of, I figured out ways to help myself feel strong, even if I was in my own appointment. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I had all these things that I did. Is that something you want? Like,
absolutely.
Okay. I wrote them down because I was like, okay, what do I do? And I think that as an exercise, as homework, if you can think about what do you do to help protect yourself, comfort yourself, heal from these things. And I realized over the years, I have so many things that I do. So, there's that kind of, how do you prep beforehand? How do you protect yourself in the moment? And then how do you heal afterwards? There's this is every time I have an appointment, whether it's for me or with Aaron. So I think one of the first things is to be aware of my trigger points and what things set me off. And last year when I went into the cancer hospital for a mammogram, I've got this thing about the security guards, and I don't know if it's my old punk rock background or, believe it or not, I look like, a suburban mom now, but the whole idea of, anybody in authority kind of sets me off immediately. I know there's a lot of patients like that for very, very good reasons. So when I come to the front door and the security guard is arguing with me, I have to take off my mask and put on his mask and do that whole mask theater that they make you do at the front door. That is a trigger for me. And I know that it is. And that can actually make me cry. Like, I'm not even in the the clinic room yet. And already I feel like myself, I'm on edge. So so I know these certain things, and even the parkade at the cancer hospital, I can't park in there anymore. A, it's really expensive, which bugs me. And it's like $15 an hour. And B, I've got too many bad memories of having to go for various diagnostic imaging and then my treatment. So what I've learned to do is I park far away, and it happens to be kind of near downtown Vancouver. And so I go for a nice meandering walk before I get to the appointment. Like if I have time, right? Sometimes we're rushed, we don't have time. The other thing I do kind of before COVID is I'll pick up a coffee. This is again, a very suburban lady thing to do, but it's kind of a crutch for me to be hanging on to a cup of coffee when it makes me feel, I think, a little more powerful when I come in. I figured that part of it out. And then once I'm there, I realized that I can also say no to things. I mean, some things you can't really get away from, like the receptionist who's always, for some reason, yelling my birth date, that's what it feels like anyways, across the clinic room. Like there's very little privacy and I can't do anything about that. But when they bring me in and they weigh me, I don't know why they weigh me. Like I could say to them if I've gained weight or lost weight, like I'm aware of that myself, but what do patients know? I guess we don't. So, but I say to her, I don't want to know how much I weigh. So that's me taking back a little bit of control. And they're always like, you can tell. And I'm like, so I just close my eyes. I don't look at the thing. And I say, don't tell me how much I weigh. So I think I do these things, these little things, seemingly little things that help make me feel more powerful, even though I still feel like a little turtle in there, but it does help a little bit. So I'm like, not totally a puddle on the floor. If it's something hard, I often, if Mike's not with me, he makes sure that he's available afterwards by phone, so I can phone him immediately. And this has to do with Aaron stuff too, right? And also forgiving myself if I don't speak up in the moment has been really important to me, because like I said, I got a lot of pressure that I need to advocate at all times, and sometimes I don't, and there's good reason for that. And also Isabel Jordan, who is also on Twitter, is a mom who taught me this when I was in cancer treatment, because I was saying about how horrible the whole thing was. She said, walk in there like you're the queen, she said. Walk in there like you're the queen. And I'm not like saying, oh, I demand this, I demand that, where's my warm blanket? Like I'm not acting like that, but thinking that in my head helps give me a little bit more confidence. Like it helps me like a tiny bit, so I don't feel so devastated afterwards. So those are all the little, I don't know what you do, Donna, but I've got all these little things. It's almost like superstitions that I do to try to make myself feel better and then feel better afterwards too. I don't book anything the rest of the day either. In case it's gone really bad, I just make sure that I'm lucky with my work schedule. I make sure I book it off just in case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started saying to people, I need you to be very nice to me. I actually say that. And, when people ask, how can they support me as a Nicholas's mom, or, the caregiver daughter for my mother, how can we support you? And I will say, I need you to be very nice to me.
That's awesome. Yes, I don't think that's threatening. You're not implying that they're not being nice. You're just setting the tone right at the beginning.
Setting the tone and sort of giving them the information that I am strong, but I'm fragile and I'm emotional. I'm feeling frightened and exhausted oftentimes, if you're in the hospital. I just want to highlight a couple of comments from the chat. Claire is saying that when medical professionals or therapists refuse anything, I say I have recently started to ask their refusal to be added to their notes. So it makes them reconsider it makes them reconsider the ramifications of not being responsive to whatever it is that you're asking for. If you say, would you please write that in the chart that, you know, I've asked for this, but you have said that it's not possible to give me this, whatever it may be. And Deb says, long-term cancer patient here in Toronto, Sunnybrook. I have seen an oncology psychiatrist to help me cope with the ongoing medical trauma as a direct result of how I've been treated. And it's cumulative, that's for sure. One thing she taught me to say are the words directly to my oncologist, Dr. X, I need you to help me with fill in the blanks, because otherwise it's left to me to figure things out. And that is just so fantastic, Deb. Thank you very much for sharing that, and Claire as well.
Those are both about accountability, right? Like putting both those comments about putting the ball back into the professional's court, and that you're aware that they are accountable for what happens, which I think is because we have to take it on, like as Deb said, we have to take it on otherwise. It's just, so Dr. Victor Montori has a movement that's called the Patient Revolution, and it's based on his book that's called Why We Revolt. And in his book, he talks a lot about the burden of being a patient. So like anytime we can offset that burden to somebody else who is probably more appropriate that they take it anyways, right? But we have to be really careful. Like the way you coached your words, Donna, is that we have to be polite at all times. We have to be well-behaved. We're not supposed to get angry, or we'll end up with a flag. They actually have flags. I used to work in a children's hospital. They have flags in people's chart. If they're considered to be difficult, they're purple flags. You ever see a purple flag in your chart? That might be the reason why.
That person with the flag might just be grieving and beside themselves with worry.
Right. And one thing you taught me is there's not, when we're talking about complaints and giving feedback and all that, and speaking up, really, it's about speaking up, having the safe space to speak up in a healthcare setting, is that there's not difficult families, but there are difficult situations. So always being able to reframe that. I know Yona Lunsky talks about that too, is important. And for us to recognize, like I said, me to recognize what my triggers are, what things kind of set me off, and then to have these little strategies that I do to try to make myself feel better. So I can, sometimes it's just a matter of getting through the thing, right? So I can get out and then maybe go meet my husband for coffee if I can, that helps me feel better. But anything that we can do, my book, I talk a lot about serenity prayer, like the old Alcoholics Anonymous thing about the serenity prayer, but really what is in our control and what is out of our control. And I can't control how the health system is funded. I can't even control how this physician is behaving towards me. Like I can kind of try, but I can control how I take care of myself and recognize, like you said, that we're often in these hard, well, to be truthful, shitty situations where we're being caused harm. And I think there's power in recognizing that for us.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that it has struck me over the years again and again and again that people who work in healthcare, have no clue what our lives have been like, what our triggers may be, and how we're feeling on the day. I mean, they just don't know. And I'm not sure why it is that when we're first starting out in a healthcare journey with somebody that we love, or even if it's for ourselves, that we kind of think that there's this need to be no trouble, to be do everything that you're told, and to be a good patient or a good caregiver. And the last webinar that we had was with it was about trauma, and it was about a research project that I partnered on the trauma that people have who are parents of children who are very medically complex. And, tons of near death and
Mhm.
emergency situations in this. And I think that if it's worth having a conversation with yourself. And Sue,
Mhm.
you are the person who is leading this movement to get a better healthcare experience. And I wonder, like, if I had known then what I knew, what I know now, you know, when Nicholas had his first seizure, and I pretty much collapsed on the floor when the neurologist told me that Nicholas, our son, had epilepsy. I don't think they knew. Well, how could they know why I had that reaction? I mean, anybody would have a reaction hearing that about their 2-year-old, but I had had the experience of witnessing a grand mal seizure in my father. And I thought that he was having another stroke. He had already suffered 2 strokes. And when I was home alone with him and saw him have a seizure, I thought I was witnessing him having another stroke and that he was dying before my eyes. So I remember crying and saying, I can take any disability, cerebral palsy, gastro dysfunction, give me anything except seizures. I can't handle my child having seizures. And, I think that now I know that if there's something looming on the medical scene that frightens me for reasons that are in my past, like if I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I would say now, in my old age, I would say, I don't know how to handle this information because my mother had breast cancer. And as a child, I had to change her dressings on her breast. And I was traumatized by that.
Oh my God, my daughter did that for me. She was 19, but still. Yeah.
But she's a nurse.
Well, I know,
I was
but
a
still.
child.
I know it's.
I think I might have been 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't
Your
know why my
caregiving
mother.
started very early, Donna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so these linkages, these
Yes.
memories, this personal history is so important.
Right.
And I wonder whether or not it's worth going up to the lady at the desk and saying, I am so scared. Can you tell me something that will help me feel better? What person wouldn't respond? Don't you think you might? What kind of a reaction do you think you would get if you
Well,
said something like that?
well, I would hope that you would get a compassionate response back, but I can't guarantee that. Like I feel the people at the desk feel like we're a bother and we're like interrupting their work when we come up to the desk. So, I
Yeah.
think that would be a risk. You know what? It would make me feel very vulnerable. I think to admit that out loud, I think I put on my armor when I go into appointments, whether it's for me or to protect Aaron, and we do what we do to kind of get through it. Like that to me is my approach to it. And, I think it's interesting what you say about, so in the cancer world, once you've had cancer and you have to go back for scans or mammograms or whatever, we call that scanxiety, right? It's called scanxiety
Yes.
instead of anxiety.
Yeah.
And I read the best definition of that, and it has to do with what you said about your history, is it's not anxiety because I'm not worried about what might happen. It's scanxiety because I'm worried about what has happened before. Like the worst has already happened to me. So it is different than just kind of worry about something that might, it's something that has already happened. And so, recognizing, I think, so now I'm going to sound like my therapist, which I do go see, and in fact started seeing when I was in cancer treatment. And that was 5 years ago, and I continued with that. And I mean, I wish that all caregivers had access to mental health resources. People who understand caregiving is really important too. I remember when Aaron was born, we tried to go see a therapist because we were dealing with lots of grief, and it was a very dark time, and we had 5 children, and Mike had this ex-wife, and like it was a disaster basically. Somehow we got through it. And I remember him saying, "Oh, Down syndrome, well, they're just happy all the time." That's what he said to me, this therapist. And I was like, "You're the wrong therapist for me to see." Like,
Yeah.
but I say, we need to have people who understand, caregiving and disability and being a patient. Like, that's a special kind of mental health professional, I think. So if you can find someone, it's really awesome. But what my therapist, of course, talks to me about, even before I go into medical appointments, is this awareness of my feelings. So if I feel like my fear lives in my gut, like that's where it lives. And so when I feel that in there, just knowing that instead of like, I'm going to start rolling down a hill and get out of control and be all like, I would say, okay, I'm feeling fearful. So my long answer to I wouldn't necessarily tell the receptionist that I was scared, but I would tell myself I was scared. So Judy says, I totally agree. The receptionist would not respond very good. I've met some receptionists. They should look for another job because they have zero compassion for patients. Yes, I agree. And I've spoken, at staff orientation to folks who are receptionists and talk to them about how much power they have in healthcare. In fact, because they're the ones that give the first impression. So if the first impression we have with the first person we speak to, like for me, it's the security guard, and I'm arguing over what kind of mask I can wear in the hospital, or it's the receptionist who's checking you in, how really that sets the tone for the rest of the interaction. And it usually doesn't if it sets a bad tone, you hardly ever go up from it, right? Like the whole rest of the appointment totally falls apart. So, and I have a theory about people who are receptionists and booking clerks. And I used to be a unit clerk. I worked as a unit clerk when I was just out of university, and who is kind of the receptionist at the unit, right? When you walk up, that's tends to be the person, hopefully, who looks up and says hello to you. And what I realized, because they're clerical positions and they don't pay very well, those people, they have very little power in other ways. So they kind of like hang on to their power. And it's us patients and families that if they're having troubles and they don't like their job or somebody just crapped on them from above, we're the ones that it all goes downhill, right? Like we're the ones that get to be at the receiving end of it. And I think, I know in the Children's Hospital, there's certain clinics that have famous receptionists that are like totally rude to families. And what we do, and this is another part I wanted to make sure I brought up, is what us families do. We're like, oh my God, I have to go to this clinic. I won't say which one it is. And then what we do is we commiserate with each other beforehand. And then afterwards we'll go, oh, you wouldn't believe what this woman did when we were in the clinic. And so this thing, when you talk about supporting, it's not just, it is my husband. He supports in other ways. He's not really a feelings guy, so he's not really supportive of that way. But to have other people who understand what you're talking about is so, so valuable, to have that community. And I just remember, having to go to an IEP meeting at one of those meetings at the school about Aaron. And my friends who had kids with Down syndrome too knew that I had this meeting, and them texting me afterwards and saying, how did it go? Right. And that I didn't have to explain I didn't have to explain any of that. They already knew because they were peers of mine. And so how valuable that is, I think. Dawn, I've done that with you, right? When I've been going through a hard time, I'm part of a group, it's not really going well. It's like, if you have people that you can lean on, and you don't have to explain, and I don't have to sell anything to you, I can just talk to you like we're around a kitchen table.
Yeah.
How I wish the world, including health professionals, would help connect us together more. I think that we need help. We need help with that, because some people are very alone. They don't have the communities that we have.
Yeah, it's so true. Particularly if people are going through something in their family that is a serious health challenge. For the very first time, I'm always totally amazed when I meet someone who is like my age, who has never been in the hospital or never had kids in the hospital, or I don't know. I think some of us were just born under this star where we go through something with the health care system at
It'll
every.
catch up. It catches up eventually. It's
Oh, you
especially
will.
now with the pandemic. I think
Oh,
people
yeah.
are aware how important
Yeah.
health and healthcare and public health is to your everyday life. And it's
Mhm.
funny, you had said earlier about like doctors and having that they didn't understand what it felt like to be in the hospital. And certainly when I do storytelling, I talk a lot about that feeling part of it to try to get them to have connection and empathy. But what happens is then suddenly, I'm going to sound really cynical here, but suddenly a doctor will get cancer, write a book about it, and
Yeah, and
suddenly it's like
oh.
just news. It's like, oh, and it's like, but us patients and caregivers have been talking about this for years, but
Yeah.
it's not validated because we don't have the MD or the PhD or anything, because we're just
Mhm.
like regular people, right? So part
Yeah.
of my challenge for us is to find opportunities to speak up and share our stories, whether it's just for ourselves. Sometimes it's to process some crappy stuff that's happened to us, or sharing them more publicly, right? As far on a blog or written or through Facebook or Twitter, whatever, because I think the more we speak up about what has happened to us, I'm hoping the more understanding the rest of the world will be of caregivers. And we do that through, like you said, stories. That's how we talk about ourselves.
Yeah. The other thing is, I think that a lot of people gravitate toward alternative medicine and therapies because there is more of a sense that you will be healed in those spaces. And Gehane has said in the chat, I just attended tapping techniques. And the instructor said, validating your fear or your stress with tapping really helps. And this is an alternative therapy. And a lot of people who seek these alternative therapeutic interventions, I think, are looking for what it is that we're talking about, somebody to listen to them and care for them, which has been engineered out of healthcare because of efficiency, right?
Well, okay. So all that power taking away that I talked about when I read that chapter, all the things they do, they make us take off our clothes, they rush, they make us wait. They tell us to come early for an appointment, so we have to wait extra. Like there's all these, they make us pay, we have to pay for parking. It's hard to find parking. Like all those things are purposely built in the system to take away our power. So what I'm interested in, like I said, I don't want the corporate's power. I'm not interested. I don't want the corner office or the boardroom. I want to be able to feel and demonstrate my own power about how I'm a powerful, like you are the queen when you walk into that appointment, or you are the boss, like whatever you want to use. And for us to feel like we are important, we have value and worth. And I think to me, it's almost like caregivers and patients, we try to change the system. My whole book is about we can't change the system. Like I give up. All we can really change is ourselves. Like I remember a quote that I used in my first book when Aaron was born, and it's from a dad, and I could never find the proper credit for it. But what he said was, when my son was born, what I tried to do was change him so he would fit into the world. So we do that with lots of therapy and stuff with our kids. And then I tried to change the world so they would accept my child. And I still do that. I mean, I still try to do that.
Me too.
But then I realized the only thing I could change was myself. So I hope for, the folks that are listening, that they realize that like you are a badass, like as Brené Brown talks about badass. Any of us who stand fully in our truth, I think of what's happening in our life, whether we talk about it publicly or not, are total badasses. And what we need to do is like get together, validate each other so that we can, it's almost like, well, I don't want to talk about war now with the situation right now, but sometimes it feels like that we're going off to this traumatic place, and I can't seem to change the traumatic place, but I can change how I protect myself and acknowledge that it's traumatic. I think that's a part of it, instead of this thing, which is very Canadian, to go, oh no, minimize, oh, it's not so bad, or you didn't need chemo, you only had radiation, what are you complaining about? Like,
Mhm.
we get that, or we're not America. We get that a lot here in Canada. You can't talk about, changes in the system because it's worse down in America. And so I think really saying, hey, no, wait a minute. Like, I think this could be better. I remember talking once to an audiologist a couple of years ago with Aaron when he went in for a hearing test. And the way she was talking to me, like, she was just so dismissive. And I finally did say to her, I'd like you to speak respectfully to me. That's what I said. And I said it very quietly and gently, as we have to do. You can't be angry or nobody will listen to you, or they'll call security and drag you out probably. There's all these signs on the wall in the waiting room about staff
Yeah.
wanting respectful and don't bully. And I
Well,
agree with
you
that.
know,
Like, we should be
abuse-
bullying staff. Yeah, but
Abuse
don't.
will not
Yeah,
be
but treat neighbors.
tolerated.
So it's a relationship thing, right? So we need to, like, it goes both ways. So
Yeah.
but I think
But
knowing that you're a badass for the work and think about all you've done. Like, if you think and reflect on your story, Donna, which I know you have because you're a writer, but lots of people don't make the time to do that, to say, I've been through a lot and look what I've done, right? I think is really, really important to help take back some of that power.
Yeah. And I guess what I was trying to get at earlier was that this idea that it is possible to use your vulnerability as power, announcing to the receptionist that you're quite nervous, and just for people to know this, and then sit back and wait for them to be nice to you. This is a little bit like what Brené Brown talks about, claiming your brokenness in your power.
Right.
And but I think that everyone is going to have a conversation with themselves. If you're with healthcare providers a lot, if you're looking after someone who is in the hospital a lot, you need to work this out so that you're not harmed by your healthcare experiences, right? So you've got to figure out, are you the princess? Are you the warrior? Are you, do you want to declare your true feelings and ask for them to be acknowledged and to be addressed through kindness and compassion? Are you going to insist on that? Like, decide on your approach, I think, right? That is,
sometimes you just want to get in and out. Like, sometimes there's that too, right?
Yeah.
Like, when I'm going for a mammogram, which is a
Yeah.
very painful, especially if after you've had breast cancer, extremely painful experience. It's like, I just want to get the hell out of there. So I'm not going to be changing the world, changing my but knowing that, like, I guess that's what you're talking about, is preparing ourselves in some way before we go into whatever kind of, and I got a dental fear. Well, I normally don't take Aaron to the dentist because I had some dental trauma as I was a child. So then my husband takes him in, right? Like, if there's alternatives then that way. So kind of doing some planning instead of I go in there, something happens. Like, I once went for a mammogram and they wouldn't give me a gown. And I had to take off my shirt in front of the mammogram tech. And I was like standing there with no shirt on. And if they had told me that, I would have brought a cardigan or something so I could be covered up or whatever. They were saving money on gowns. And so they wouldn't give me a gown. But it was like, if I had known that, like, I think the prep, and sometimes we talk to each other and we say, oh, you're going to that clinic, that receptionist, she's like super rude. And so when the woman is super rude to me, I'm not surprised. Like, it doesn't throw me off. I go, okay, this is the way it is here. I can accept that to try to get through it. So I think the more we talk, I always thought I like to start up a Yelp for hospitals and for doctors' offices, and not one of those rate your MD, but that talks about like what the experience is in that particular setting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Donna, and thank you, Sue, for a wonderful session today.